"That ring is yours," he said. Mafia boss Slid. Across the table to the crying waitress, the smell of stale espresso and garlic hung heavy in the air of Harbor Line, a scent that had long ago seeped into the fibers of Lily Hart's uniform. It was 11 at night on a Friday, and her feet throbbed with a dull, rhythmic ache that seemed to synchronize with the beating of her heart. She ran a damp rag over table 4, her wrist trembling with a fatigue that went deeper than muscle. It was the exhaustion of a bone-deep fear that never really let her sleep. She paused, pulling her phone from her apron pocket. The screen cracked down the middle like a spider web lit up with a notification. It was another email from the billing department at St. Jude's Medical Center. Final notice. The subject line read. Lily stared at the words until they blurred. The number at the bottom of the invoice was $4,300.50. That was just for the last round of tests. It did not touch the principal on the surgery Emma had needed 6 months ago, nor did it cover the medication that kept her daughter's heart beating in a steady rhythm. Lily swallowed hard, tasting bile. She had $72 in tips in her pocket. She shoved the phone back into her apron, blinking rapidly to force the tears back. Crying did not pay bills. Crying did not fix the congenital defect in Emma's heart. Crying just got you fired, and she needed this job. She needed the double shifts. She needed every single cent. The restaurant was nearly empty. Save for the corner booth, it was the same every Friday. The corner booth belonged to them, even if no reservation was ever written in the book. Marco Vascari sat with his back to the wall, flanked by 2 men who looked like they were carved out of granite. They wore suits that cost more than Lily made in a year, the fabric dark and expensive, absorbing the dim light of the dining room. The other waitresses avoided that table. They whispered in the kitchen about the Vascari family, about stories they had heard on the news or rumors that floated through the neighborhood like smoke. They said Marco was the head of it all now, ever since his father had stepped back. They said he was dangerous. They said he was a man who ended problems by making them disappear. Lily was afraid of him too, but she was more afraid of the dark apartment where the electricity might be cut off. So she took the table. She walked over with the coffee pot, keeping her eyes lowered. The men were quiet tonight. Marco was looking at something on his phone, his expression unreadable. He had a face that seemed etched from stone, handsome in a severe, unforgiving way. His hair was dark, cut short, and his eyes were the color of black coffee, sharp and observant. He never smiled. In the 6 months she had been serving him, she had never seen his mouth curve upward once. "More coffee?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marco looked up. His gaze felt heavy, like a physical weight resting on her shoulders. He nodded once. She poured the coffee with a shaking hand, a splash of dark liquid hitting the saucer. Panic flared in her chest. "I am so sorry," she stammered, reaching for the napkins in her pocket. "I will get a fresh one." "Leave it," Marco said. His voice was a low baritone, rough like gravel. "It is fine." Lily froze, then nodded, backing away. He slipped a $100 bill onto the table, sliding it under the sugar dispenser. He did this every week. He never asked for change. He never tried to flirt with her, never tried to touch her as she walked by, never made the lewd comments the other customers sometimes did. He just watched, paid, and left. She retreated to the counter, clutching the coffee pot against her chest like a shield. The front door chimed. Lily looked up, expecting a late couple or a lost tourist. Instead, a man in a cheap, ill-fitting gray suit walked in. He had slicked-back hair that looked wet under the fluorescent lights and a face that was already twisted in a sneer. "We are closed," Lily called out, her voice tight. The man ignored her. He scanned the room, his eyes landing on her behind the counter. He marched forward, his shoes clicking loudly on the tile. "Lily Hart?" he asked. It was not a question. It was an accusation. She set the coffee pot down. "Who are you?" "Richie." "From Bay City Collections," he said, leaning over the counter. He smelled of stale cigarettes and peppermint gum. "We have been trying to reach you. Lily, you do not answer your phone. You do not answer your mail. People who owe money need to be reachable. My daughter was in the hospital. Lily said, her hands gripping the edge of the counter until her knuckles turned white. I sent a payment last week. $50. It was all I had. $50 does not cover the interest, sweetheart, Richie sneered. He pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket and slapped it onto the counter. We are done playing nice. We are moving to garnish your wages. And given that you work for tips, we are going to have to get the courts involved to audit this place. Your boss is going to love that. No, Lily gasped, the blood draining from her face. You cannot do that. I will lose my job. If I lose my job, I cannot pay anything. Please, I just need a little more time. You are out of time, Richie said, his voice rising. He was enjoying this. He leaned closer, invading her space. And let me tell you something else. If the courts do not work, we have other ways of recovering assets. You have a car, do you not? You have a television. Maybe you have some jewelry hidden away. I have nothing, Lily cried out, the tears finally spilling over. She backed up until she hit the wall of shelves behind her. Please, just leave. Richie laughed, a harsh, barking sound. I am not leaving until I get a payment. $500. Tonight, or I make a phone call that ruins your whole week. There was a scrape of a chair against the floor. It was a sharp, deliberate sound that cut through the tension like a knife. Richie stopped. He turned around. Marco Vascari was standing up. He did not look like he was in a hurry. He buttoned his suit jacket with slow, precise movements, his face completely blank. His two guards remained seated, watching with bored expressions, as if they had seen this 1,000 times. Marco walked across the restaurant. He moved with a predatory grace, silent and terrifying. He stopped 3 feet from Richie. Marco was taller, broader, and infinitely more lethal. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Is there a problem? Marco asked. His voice was soft, terrifyingly calm. Richie puffed his chest out, trying to regain his momentum. This does not concern you, pal. This is a private financial matter. It concerns me, Marco said, simply because you are being loud, and I am trying to enjoy my espresso. Richie sneered. Listen, buddy, I am doing a job here. This girl owes... Marco raised a hand. 1 finger. It was enough to silence the room. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a checkbook. He clicked a gold pen. How much? Richie blinked, confused. Excuse me? The debt, Marco said, not looking up as he began to write. The total amount, principal, interest, whatever fees you vultures tack on to feel important. How much to make you turn around and walk out that door forever? Richie's eyes widened. He looked from Marco to Lily. Calculating, 12,000. Lily gasped. It was only 8,000 last month. Marco did not blink. He finished writing, ripped the check from the book, and held it out between 2 fingers. 15,000, Marco said. This buys the debt. It buys the paperwork. And it buys your silence. If I ever see you in here again, if I ever hear that you spoke to her, looked at her, or even thought about her, the next check I write will be to a very different kind of professional. Do you understand me? Richie looked at the check. He looked at Marco's eyes. The color drained from the debt collector's face, leaving it pasty and gray. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. Yeah, I understand. Take it, Marco said. Richie snatched the check. He did not look at Lily. He turned on his heel and practically ran for the door, the bell jingling frantically as he disappeared into the night. Silence rushed back into the room, louder than the shouting had been. Lily was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. She stared at Marco, horror and humiliation warring in her chest. She felt stripped bare, her most shameful secret exposed to the most dangerous man in Briarwood. I cannot pay you back, she whispered, her voice cracking. I do not have $15,000. I never asked you to do that. Marco looked at her. The coldness in his eyes had thawed. Just a fraction. He gestured to the booth he had just left. Sit down, Lily. It was not a request. She hesitated, terrified, but her legs felt like they were about to give out. She walked around the counter and crossed the floor, sliding into the leather booth opposite him. The 2 guards stood up silently and moved to the front door, turning the sign to closed and standing guard with their backs to the room. Marco sat down across from her. He pushed his half-finished espresso to the side and folded his hands on the table. They were large hands, scarred at the knuckles, but manicured. "Tell me about the daughter," he said. Lily flinched. "How do you know about her?" "I hear things," Marco said. "You are on the phone with doctors on your breaks. You look at photos of a little girl when you think no one is watching. And you work like someone who is running out of time." Lily looked down at her hands. They were red and chapped from the sanitizer water. "Her name is Emma. She's 4, and the father gone," Lily said bitterly. "He left when he found out about the heart defect. Said he could not handle the stress." Marco made a sound low in his throat, a rumble of disgust. "So you are drowning. I am managing—" Lily lied. "You are drowning," Marco corrected her gently. "That man tonight? He was just the first—" "There will be others. The interest rates will eat you alive. You will lose this job because of the harassment, and then you will lose the apartment, and then you will lose the ability to pay for the girl's medicine." Lily let out a sob. It was an ugly, broken sound that she tried to stifle with her hand. She wiped furiously at her cheeks, humiliated to be breaking down in front of him. "Why are you doing this?" she choked out. "What do you want? Men like you." "You do not just give away $15,000. "No," Marco said. "We do not." He reached into his pocket. Lily tensed, her eyes darting to the door, wondering if she should run. But he did not pull out a weapon. He pulled out a ring. It was a diamond, large and square cut, set in platinum that caught the dim overhead light and threw sparkles across the stained tablecloth. It was heavy, old-fashioned, and undeniably real. He placed it on the wooden table between them. "I need a fiancé," Marco said. Lily stared at the ring, then up at him. What?" "My father is old school," Marco explained, his voice devoid of romance. "He believes a man without a wife is unstable. He's pressuring me to marry into a family I despise, the Romanos. If I do that, I lose control of my business. I need to look respectable to our investors. I need to look settled. I need a woman who looks innocent. Someone who has no connection to my world, to prove that I am leaving the old ways behind." He looked at her, his gaze sweeping over her messy bun, her tired eyes, her cheap uniform. "You are perfect," he said. Lily shook her head, confusion making the room spin. "You want to hire me to be your wife?" "Fiancé," he corrected. "For now. We pretend. You wear the ring. You come to dinner on Sundays. You attend a few events with me. You smile, you hold my hand, and you look at me like you love me." "And in return?" Lily asked, her voice trembling. Marco leaned forward. The intensity coming off him was like heat from a furnace. "In return, the debt is gone. Not just the $15,000, all of it. I will pay off the hospital. I will pay for the next surgery. I will move you and Emma into a building I own where there is 24-hour security. No one will ever threaten you again. No one will ever come looking for money you do not have." Lily stared at him. It sounded like a fairy tale twisted into something dark. It was a deal with the devil, written in ink and blood. "And what happens when you are done with me?" she asked. "We break up quietly," Marco said. "You keep the apartment, you keep a stipend. You walk away clean." Lily looked at the ring. It sat there, innocent and cold. It represented everything she needed. It was Emma's surgery. It was a full fridge. It was sleep. But it was also him. It was the Viscari family. It was gunshots and crime scenes and the things people whispered about. "I cannot," she whispered. "I cannot bring my daughter into your world." "Then go," Marco said. He did not sound angry. He sounded resigned. "The debt collector will be back in a month. The hospital will cut you off. You have choices. Lily, make one." Lily shoved herself out of the booth. She ran to the back of the restaurant, bursting through the kitchen doors and out into the alley. The night air was freezing. It smelled of wet asphalt and old garbage. Lily leaned against the brick wall, gasping for breath. She fumbled for her phone and dialed her mother's number. It rang 4 times before a sleepy voice answered. "Hello?" "Mom," Lily sobbed. "Mom, I do not know what to do. Lily, what is wrong? Is it Emma?" "No, Emma is fine. It is the money. They came to the restaurant tonight. They threatened to garnish my wages. Oh, baby." Her mother sighed, her voice thick with a helplessness that Lily knew too well. I wish I could help. You know I would if I could. But with your dad's pension, I just do not have it. I know, Lily said, sliding down the wall until she was crouching on the wet pavement. I know you do not. There are no good choices. Honey, her mother said softly. We just have to survive. You always figure it out. You are strong. Lily hung up. She stared at the dumpster across the alley. A stray cat was picking through a torn trash bag. She was strong. Everyone told her that. But she was tired of being strong. She was tired of calculating the cost of milk versus eggs. She was tired of looking at her daughter's blue-tinged lips and praying she wouldn't turn gray in the night. Marco Viscari was dangerous. But Richie, the debt collector, was dangerous too. Poverty was dangerous. The healthcare system was dangerous. At least Marco was offering a shield. Lily stood up. She wiped her face with her apron. She smoothed her hair back. She took a deep breath, inhaling the cold city air, and pushed the heavy metal door open. She walked back through the kitchen, past the silent stoves, and out into the dining room. Marco had not moved. He was still sitting there, watching the steam rise from his cold coffee. The ring was still on the table. Lily walked up to the booth. She did not sit down. She stood over him, her hands clenched at her sides. If I do this, she said, her voice steady now, though her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. If I do this, Emma is off limits. She never sees the business. She never sees a gun. She never sees you angry. Marco looked up at her. His eyes were dark, endless pits of shadow. You have my word, he said solemnly. And the debt is cleared? Tomorrow? Tonight, he said. Lily looked at the ring. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. She reached out. Her fingers were trembling as she picked it up. The metal was cool against her skin. It felt heavier than it looked. Marco watched her. He did not smile. He did not look triumphant. He looked relieved, almost. Lily took a breath that rattled in her chest. She slid the ring onto her left ring finger. It fit perfectly, as if he had known her size all along. The diamond caught the light, blazing with a cold fire. That ring is yours, Marco said softly. He stood up. He towered over her, blocking out the light, blocking out the rest of the room. He reached out and adjusted the lapel of her cheap cardigan, his knuckles brushing the skin of her throat. It was a possessive gesture, a claiming, go get your coat. Lily, he said. I am taking you home. Lily nodded. She looked down at her hand, at the heavy stone that bound her to the monster in the designer suit. She had sold herself. She knew it. But for the first time in 3 years, she knew the medical bills would be paid. She turned to get her coat, the weight of the ring feeling like an anchor dragging her down into deep, dark water. But for Emma, she would drown. She would gladly drown. The morning sun hit the pavement hard, but inside the black sedan that idled outside Lily's apartment building, the world was cool and tinted. When the door opened for her, Lily hesitated on the curb. She looked down at her worn sneakers, the rubber peeling slightly at the toe, and then at the pristine leather interior of the car. It felt like stepping into a spaceship, a vessel designed for a planet she did not belong on. Get in, the driver said politely but firmly. Mister, Viscari is waiting. Lily slid into the back seat. The car smelled of expensive leather and that vague, crisp scent of new money. They drove in silence to the city center, stopping in front of a boutique with no prices in the window and a doorman who looked more like a security detail. Marco was already inside. He stood near a rack of evening gowns, inspecting a swath of midnight blue silk with a critical eye. He wore a charcoal suit today, tailored to perfection, making him look less like a gangster and more like a CEO of a company that dealt in hostile takeovers. When the door chimed, he turned. His gaze dropped immediately to her sneakers, then traveled up to her frayed coat. He did not sneer, but his expression tightened, as if he were calculating the work ahead. You are late, he said. Traffic, Lily mumbled, feeling small. Marco gestured to a woman standing nearby, a personal shopper with a tablet and a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. This is Elena. She knows the assignment. Elena stepped forward. Miss Hart. A pleasure. We have a lot to get through before this evening." Lily stood awkwardly as Marco took a seat in a velvet armchair, crossing one leg over the other. He pulled out his phone, seemingly checking emails, but Lily could feel his attention on her as Elena began pulling items from the racks. Dresses in emerald green, deep burgundy, and shimmering gold. Fabrics that looked like water and felt like clouds. "Try this," Elena said, handing Lily a dress the color of vintage wine. Lily retreated to the dressing room. When she stepped out, she felt like an imposter. The silk clung to her curves, exposing the line of her throat and the slope of her shoulders. She stepped onto the pedestal, hugging her arms around her waist. Marco looked up. He stopped scrolling. The silence stretched for a long moment, heavy and thick. His eyes traced the silhouette of the dress, lingering on the way the deep red fabric contrasted with her pale skin. For a second, the businesslike detachment in his face cracked, replaced by something warmer, something that made the air in the boutique feel suddenly thin. "It is too much," Lily said, breaking the silence. "I look like I am playing dress-up." "No," Marco said, his voice low. "You look exactly like what I need you to be." He gestured to Elena with 2 fingers. "Take it, and the green one, and the shoes, all of it. Give my fiancé whatever she needs." The word fiancé rolled off his tongue with a smooth, practiced ease. But the way he looked at her, as if he were seeing her for the first time, not as a waitress, but as a woman, made Lily's breath hitch. She turned back to the mirror, her cheeks flushing. The reflection staring back at her looked terrified, but beneath the fear, there was a glimmer of someone she barely recognized, someone who might actually belong in his world. The drive to the Vescari family dinner was tense. The city lights blurred past the window as they rehearsed the lie that would protect them both. "How did we meet?" Lily asked, twisting the engagement ring on her finger. It felt heavy, a constant reminder of the contract she had signed. "You were closing up," Marco said. Keeping his eyes on the road, "I came in for a late coffee. We started talking. You made me laugh." "I made you laugh?" Lily repeated, skepticism dripping from her voice. "That is the least believable part of the story. You never laugh. I'm not sure you even know how—" Marco glanced at her, and the corner of his mouth twitched. It was a small movement, barely there, but it transformed his face. "I smile," he said dryly. "On occasion, usually when people are not looking." "I have never seen it," Lily countered, feeling a sudden, reckless bravery. "I think your face might crack if you tried." Marco let out a short huff of breath that might have been a chuckle. "Keep pushing, Lily. You might just get a reaction." The banter felt dangerous, but it also felt easy. It was a distraction from the knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. As the car turned onto a private drive lined with manicured hedges, the humor faded. A massive stone building loomed ahead, the private club where the Vescari family held court. "Do not speak unless spoken to," Marco instructed, his voice dropping back into its command register. "Let me handle my father, and stay close to me." Lily nodded, her throat dry. They walked in together. The dining room was dimly lit, filled with the murmur of low conversations and the clink of silver on china. Heads turned as they entered. Lily felt the weight of a dozen stares, assessing, judging, pricing her dress and her jewelry. She gripped Marco's arm tighter, grateful for the solid muscle beneath the wool of his suit. At the head of a long table sat Lorenzo Vescari. He was an older, sharper version of Marco, with silver hair and eyes that looked like they had seen everything and forgiven nothing. Beside him was a woman who had to be Sophia, Marco's sister. She was beautiful, elegant, and looked at Lily with the cold indifference of a cat watching a mouse. And there was another woman, Bianca Romano. She sat with a rigid posture, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She was looking at Lily with open disdain. "Father," Marco said, nodding to the older man. "Marco," Lorenzo replied, his voice a rasp. "You are late, and you brought a guest, my fiancé," Marco corrected, pulling out a chair for Lily. "Lily, this is my father, Lorenzo, my sister, Sophia, and Bianca." Lily sat, smoothing her dress. "It is a pleasure to meet you all," she said, her voice shaking only slightly. Sophia took a sip of wine, her eyes lingering on the ring. "That is quite a rock," she drawled. "Marco must have raided the vault." "Tell me, Lily, what does a girl like you do with a ring like that when she is scrubbing tables?" Lily stiffened. Beside her, Marco shifted, his jaw tightening. "Lily manages the floor," Marco said calmly. "And the ring stays on her finger. Sophia, where it belongs." Bianca let out a soft, cruel laugh. "It is charming. Really, a Cinderella story. I suppose every waitress dreams of being rescued by a wealthy patron. Tell me, Lily, how much is the debt? Or is it just the thrill of the lifestyle you are after?" Lily felt the blood rush to her face. The heat of shame burned her neck. She opened her mouth to defend herself, but Lorenzo spoke first. "We had an agreement." "Marco," the old man said, ignoring Lily completely. "The union with the Romano family was not a suggestion. It was a strategy. Bianca has been waiting. I made my choice," Marco said, his voice hard as flint. "Choices have consequences," Lorenzo said, cutting into his steak with precise, violent movements. "You bring a restaurant girl into our house. You bring weakness. She does not know our world. She will break. She is stronger than you think," Marco said. The dinner continued in an agonizing blur of veiled insults and pointed silences. Lily could feel Bianca's eyes boring into her, filled with a mixture of jealousy and hatred. Every time Lily picked up the wrong fork or hesitated before answering a question, she saw a smirk touch Bianca's lips. It was suffocating. Suddenly, music began to play from the corner of the room. A small jazz band had set up, the saxophone wailing a low, mournful tune. Marco stood up abruptly. His chair scraped against the floor, silencing the table. "Dance with me," he said to Lily. "It was not a question." He held out his hand. Lily hesitated, looking at the hostile faces around the table, then at Marco. His expression was stony, but his eyes were urgent. She placed her hand in his. He led her to the small dance floor. As soon as they were away from the table, the tension in his shoulders seemed to drop an inch. He pulled her close, his hand resting firmly on the small of her back, guiding her into the rhythm of the music. "I am sorry," he murmured, his mouth close to her ear. "They are sharks." "I can handle sharks," Lily whispered back, though her knees felt weak. "I deal with hungry customers every day." Marco pulled her closer, until her chest was pressed against his. She could feel the heat radiating from him, the steady, rhythmic thump of his heart against her palm where it rested on his chest. The room seemed to shrink, the judging eyes fading into the background until it was just the two of them, swaying in the dim light. "Relax," Marco instructed softly. "You are stiff as a board." "I am nervous," she admitted. "Do not be. You are with me." He moved his hand on her back, his thumb tracing small, soothing circles against the silk of her dress. It was an unconscious gesture, intimate and possessive. Lily felt a shiver run up her spine, a shock of electricity that had nothing to do with fear. She looked up at him and found him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. For a moment, the lie fell away. There was no debt, no contract, no hostile father, just a man and a woman, moving together in the dark. Lily felt a pull, a magnetic gravity drawing her toward him. She realized with a jolt of panic that she wanted to lean her head against his shoulder. She wanted to stay in the circle of his arms. She looked away, her face burning. "This is just a job," she reminded herself. "Do not forget that." As the song ended, Marco held her for a beat longer than necessary. His thumb brushed the sensitive skin of her inner wrist, sending another jolt through her. Then he stepped back, the mask of the cold boss sliding back into place. "Let us go," he said. "I have had enough of family for one night." The drive back was quiet, but the air in the car had changed. It was charged with static, thick with the memory of the dance. Marco directed the driver to stop at Harbor Line. "I need to check the receipts," he said. "It will take 10 minutes. Come inside. It is safer than waiting in the car." The restaurant was closed, the chairs overturned on the tables. The night manager, a nervous man named Paolo, was waiting by the bar with a young waiter Lily recognized, a boy named Tommy who had only started 2 weeks ago. Tommy looked pale, sweating profusely. 2 of Marco's men were standing behind him. their arms crossed. "What is this?" Marco asked, his voice dropping to that terrifying, calm register he had used with the debt collector. Paolo wrung his hands. "I caught him. Boss, stealing from the tip jar and shorting the register." Marco walked over to Tommy. The boy was shaking so hard his teeth were chattering. Lily stood by the door, hugging her coat around herself, the magic of the dance evaporating instantly. "Is it true?" Marco asked. I needed it," Tommy stammered. "My mom, she got sick." And Marco struck. It was not a physical blow. He simply slammed his hand down on the bar top, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Tommy flinched violently. "Do not lie to me," Marco said. His voice was not loud, but it was cold enough to freeze water. "I know your mother. She died 3 years ago. You needed the money for the track. You have a gambling problem." Tommy began to cry. "I'm sorry, Mr. Viscari. I will pay it back, I swear." Marco stared at him. The silence stretched, agonizing and brutal. Lily watched Marco's face. There was no mercy there, no kindness, just the hard, calculating look of a predator deciding whether or not to kill. "You stole from my family," Marco said. "You stole from the people who work here. You stole from Lily." He gestured to where Lily stood in the shadows. Tommy looked at her, his eyes pleading. Marco turned to his men. "Take him out back." Lily gasped. Marco ignored her. "Teach him a lesson," he told the men. "Make sure he understands that he is never to set foot in this neighborhood again. If he comes back, if I even hear his name, finish it." The men grabbed Tommy by the arms and dragged him toward the kitchen. The boy was sobbing, his feet dragging on the floor. The kitchen doors swung shut, cutting off his pleas. Marco adjusted his cuffs. He looked at Paolo. "Clean this up." He walked toward Lily. She backed away, hitting the doorframe. Her heart was hammering in her chest. The man who had held her so gently on the dance floor was gone. This was the monster everyone whispered about. Marco stopped. He saw the fear in her eyes. He did not try to reassure her. He did not apologize. "Wait in the staff room," he said. "I will be there in a minute." Lily fled. She sat in the staff room on a crate of napkins, her hands trembling. The room was cluttered with aprons and boxes of pasta, smelling of bleach and old coffee. It was a familiar, safe place, but now it felt like a cage. She looked down at her hand. The ring sparkled under the lone light bulb. It felt like a shackle. She gripped the ring and pulled. It was tight, but she twisted it until it slid over her knuckle. She held it in her palm, staring at the diamond that cost more than her life was worth. "I cannot do this," she whispered to the empty room. She jumped when a shadow fell over her. Marco was standing in the doorway, leaning against the frame. He had taken off his jacket and rolled up his sleeves, revealing muscular forearms and a watch that glinted in the dim light. He looked tired. The harsh lines of his face were deeper in the bad lighting. "Why did you take it off?" he asked. Lily closed her hand over the ring. "You hurt him. Tommy." Marco walked into the room. He did not crowd her, but the space was small. He leaned against the sink, crossing his ankles. "I fired him. Lily, my men are going to scare him. They are going to put him in a cab and tell him that if he returns, he will regret it. That is all." "You sounded like you were going to kill him," Lily said, her voice shaking. "Fear is a tool," Marco said simply. "If I do not use it, people steal. If people steal, the business fails. If the business fails, I cannot protect the people who depend on me, including you." Lily looked up at him. He looked weary, stripped of the armor he wore in public. "It is too much," she said. "The dinner, the lies, the violence. I am just a waitress. Marco, I am not cut out for this." Marco pushed off the sink. He took a step toward her. "You held your own against Bianca tonight," he said softly. "You stood tall next to my father. You are stronger than you give yourself credit for." He stopped in front of her. Lily remained seated on the crate, looking up at him. The distance between them was negligible. She could smell the sandalwood of his cologne, mixed with the faint, metallic scent of the night air. "How is Emma?" he asked. The sudden shift in topic caught her off guard. "She is..." "Okay," Lily said, her voice cracking. "The surgery is scheduled for next Tuesday. I am terrified. Marco, if something goes wrong..." If the graft does not hold. She broke off, biting her lip to stop the sob that was clawing its way up her throat. She looked down, unable to meet his gaze. Marco moved then. He crouched down so they were eye level. His presence was overwhelming, a wall of heat and solidity. "She will be fine," he said. "I hired the best surgeon in the state. He does not make mistakes." Lily looked up. Her eyes were swimming with tears. "I do not know how to thank you, even after tonight, even after everything. You are saving her life." Marco lifted his hand. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, his fingers hovering in the air between them. Then, slowly, he reached out. His thumb brushed away a tear that had fallen onto her cheek. His skin was rough, warm, and shockingly gentle. He didn't pull away. His hand cupped her face, his fingers sliding into the hair at her temple. "You do not need to thank me," he whispered. Lily leaned into his touch. It was an unconscious movement, a seeking of comfort in the middle of the storm. Her breath hitched. She watched his eyes drop to her lips, then back up to her eyes. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with the same electricity that had been there during the dance, but stronger now, rawer. Marco leaned in. His eyes were dark, searching. Lily's heart pounded against her ribs. She did not pull away. She parted her lips slightly, a silent invitation she hadn't meant to give. His face was inches from hers. She could feel the warmth of his breath. The world outside the staff room fell away. There was only him. Only this moment where the dangerous boss and the desperate waitress were just two lonely people finding an anchor. Buzz. The sound was jarring in the silence. Marco's phone vibrated violently in his pocket. The spell broke. Marco pulled back sharply, his jaw tightening. The softness vanished from his eyes, replaced instantly by the guarded look of the dawn. He stood up, pulling the phone from his pocket. He glanced at the screen, and his expression darkened. "I have to take this," he said, his voice rough. Lily let out a breath she didn't know she had been holding. She nodded, feeling cold where his hand had been. "Put the ring back on." "Lily," Marco said, not looking at her as he walked to the door. "We are not done yet." He stepped out into the hallway, answering the phone with a sharp, "What is it?" Lily sat alone in the cluttered room. She opened her hand. The ring sat there, heavy and demanding, with shaking fingers. She slid it back onto her finger, staring at the door where he had stood, wondering if she was saving her daughter only to lose herself. The television in Lily's cramped living room was an old model, the picture grainy and prone to static, but the flames on the screen were clear enough. They licked up the sides of a warehouse on the south side of Briarwood, turning the night sky a bruised purple and orange. The news anchor, a woman with a tight expression, spoke of an industrial accident, but she used words like suspicious accelerants and turf disputes. Lily sat on the edge of her sofa, clutching a throw pillow to her chest. Emma was asleep in the next room, her breathing aided by the hum of a nebulizer, oblivious to the fact that the city was burning. The phone on the coffee table buzzed, vibrating against the wood. Lily picked it up. It was Marco. "Turn on the news," he said. "No greeting, no pleasantries. I am watching it," Lily whispered, her eyes fixed on the burning structure. Is that you?" "It is the Caldero crew," Marco said, his voice sounding tinny and distant through the speaker. "They are sending a message. That warehouse was one of our distribution centers." Lily felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. This was not the abstract danger of movie mobsters. This was real fire. This was real destruction happening 3 miles from where her daughter slept. "You are safe," Marco said, as if sensing her panic. "But the temperature is rising. I do not like where you live." "Lily, the building has no doorman. The locks are cheap. It is too easy to get in." "I'm not moving," Lily said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Emma needs stability. I cannot just uproot her because your business is having a bad week. It is not a request." Marco said, "I am hanging up." Lily said. She ended the call, her hands shaking. She told herself he was being paranoid. She told herself that she was just a fake fiancé, a paper shield, and that no one would bother coming after a waitress with a mountain of debt. But the next morning, the illusion of safety shattered. Lily was walking Emma to the car to head to daycare when she saw it. A black sedan with tinted windows was parked across the street, idling. It was not a car that belonged in her neighborhood of rusted pickups and secondhand compacts. As she buckled Emma into her car seat, she saw the window of the sedan roll down just an inch. A puff of smoke drifted out. A pair of eyes watched her from the shadows of the interior. Lily froze, her hand gripping the door handle. The car did not move. It just sat there, a silent, predatory shark in the water. "Mommy?" Emma asked, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Why are you stopping?" "It is nothing, baby," Lily said, her voice high and brittle. She got into the driver's seat and locked the doors. As she pulled away, the sedan pulled out too, trailing her 3 car lengths back. Panic clawed at her throat. She drove to the daycare, checking the rearview mirror every 2 seconds. When she pulled into the drop-off lane, the sedan slowed, lingered at the corner, and then peeled away. Lily did not get out of the car. She called Marco. "When?" she asked the moment he answered. "Now," he said. "My driver is already on his way. Pack 2 bags, only what you need." The apartment complex Marco owned was called the Obsidian. It was a fortress of glass and steel in the center of the city, with a lobby that looked like a museum and security guards who wore earpieces and suits that fit a little too snugly around the shoulders. They moved into the penthouse suite. It was a sprawling space of polished concrete floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, and furniture that looked like art but felt uncomfortable to sit on. The first few days were a surreal blur of domesticity clashing with organized crime. Lily stood in the kitchen on a Tuesday morning, barefoot and wearing an oversized t-shirt, her hair a messy knot on top of her head. She was pouring oat clusters into a plastic pink bowl for Emma. At the breakfast bar, drinking black coffee, sat Rocco, one of Marco's top enforcers. He was a man the size of a vending machine with a face that looked like it had been broken and put back together wrong. The television in the living room was blasting a cartoon about singing vegetables. "Do you want more milk, sweetie?" Lily asked, ignoring the absurdity of the situation. Emma nodded, swinging her legs. She pointed a spoon at Rocco. "Why does he have a gun?" Lily froze. She had not realized Rocco was carrying inside the apartment. She looked over the counter. Sure enough, there was a bulge under his jacket. Rocco looked up, his face turning a shade of red that clashed with his dark suit. He set his coffee down and leaned forward, his voice surprisingly gentle. "It is for keeping the bad guys away from the cartoons. Bambina." Emma considered this, then nodded solemnly. "That is good. The broccoli is very loud." The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. Marco walked in. He looked like he hadn't slept in 2 days. His shirt sleeves were rolled up to his elbows. His tie was gone, and there were dark smudges under his eyes. He stopped in the entryway, taking in the scene. The singing vegetables, the spilled milk on the counter, his lethal enforcer discussing broccoli with a 4-year-old. For a moment, the hard lines of his face softened. He looked less like the Don of the Viscari crime family and more like a man coming home to a life he didn't know he wanted. "Good morning," Lily said, feeling suddenly self-conscious about her bare legs and messy hair. Marco walked to the kitchen. He poured himself a mug of coffee, standing close enough to Lily that she could smell the soap on his skin and the faint scent of gun oil. "Is the place suitable?" he asked, leaning his hip against the counter. "It is bigger than my entire building," Lily said dryly, "and the security guards are very attentive." Marco glanced at Rocco, who immediately straightened up and pretended to be very interested in the backsplash tiles. Emma hopped off her stool. She was holding a piece of construction paper. She walked over to Marco, who stiffened as she approached. He looked down at her as if she were a bomb he didn't know how to defuse. "I made this," Emma said, thrusting the paper upward. Marco hesitated. He looked at Lily, panic flashing in his eyes. Lily just smiled and nodded encouragingly. Marco slowly reached down and took the paper. It was a drawing done in purple and orange crayon. It showed 3 stick figures. One was small, one had long hair, and the third was a giant black scribble. "That is you," Emma explained, pointing to the black scribble. "Because you wear dark clothes, and you are big." Marco stared at the drawing. His thumb brushed over the waxy surface. The silence in the kitchen stretched, heavy and fragile. Lily watched his throat work as he swallowed. "Thank you, Emma," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "It is very accurate." He did not put the drawing down. He folded it carefully and placed it in his breast pocket, right over his heart. When he looked up at Lily, there was a vulnerability in his eyes that made her chest ache. 2 days later, the reality of their situation crashed back in. Lily was on the phone in the guest bedroom, pacing back and forth. The voice on the other end was the insurance caseworker, a woman named Brenda who sounded like she was reading from a script and enjoying every denial. "I do not understand," Lily said, her voice rising in frustration. "The approval was already processed. The surgery is next week. You cannot revoke authorization 5 days before the procedure. I am sorry, Miss Hart," Brenda droned. "But upon review of the policy, the specific cardiac graft required is considered elective under subsection C. We can approve a generic alternative, but the specialized valve is out of network." "Generic?" Lily shouted, tears pricking her eyes. "It is her heart. You do not put a generic part in a child's heart. It has to be the one the surgeon requested. If you want the specific valve, the out-of-pocket cost is $60,000, the woman said coldly. "I do not have $60,000, Lily cried. She slammed the phone down on the bed, her hands shaking so hard they hurt. A sob ripped through her chest. She covered her mouth, trying to stifle the sound, trying not to let Emma hear from the other room. She felt trapped, crushed under the weight of a system designed to break her. She needed air. Lily walked out to the balcony. The wind was high, whipping her hair across her face. The city of Briarwood sprawled out below her, a grid of lights and concrete, indifferent to her pain. She gripped the railing, her knuckles turning white, and let the tears fall. She did not hear the glass door slide open. She only realized she wasn't alone when she felt a presence behind her, a wall of warmth blocking the wind. Marco did not speak. He stepped in close, placing one large hand flat on the railing next to hers. His other hand came up to rest between her shoulder blades, a steady, heavy weight that grounded her. He stood there, bracketing her body with his own, shielding her from the cold. He waited until her sobbing subsided into jagged breaths. "I heard," he said quietly. "They are saying it is elective." Lily choked out, staring at the city lights through blurred eyes. "They are saying her life is elective. It is handled," Marco said. Lily turned her head, looking up at him over her shoulder. "What?" "I made a call while you were shouting," Marco said. "The hospital has been instructed to use the specific valve. The bill comes to me directly. It is done." Lily turned fully around. Her back was pressed against the railing, and Marco was standing inches from her. There was nowhere to go. "You cannot just fix everything with money," she whispered, though the relief was making her knees weak. "Why not?" Marco asked, his face impassive. "That is what money is for, to fix the things that are broken." Lily looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the exhaustion etched into the corners of his eyes, the fine lines of stress that hadn't been there a month ago. She saw the faint, white scar that ran along his jawline, a jagged reminder of the violence he lived in. He was a criminal. He was a man who ordered beatings and paid off debt collectors. But he was also the man who kept her daughter's drawing in his pocket and paid for heart valves without blinking. "Thank you," she breathed. Marco did not move away. He studied her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle. His gaze dropped to her lips, which were parted slightly, then moved back up to her eyes. He watched the rise and fall of her chest, the way her breath hitched in her throat. The air between them grew thin. The sounds of the city below faded away. There was only the heat of his body, the scent of him, the way his eyes seemed to darken as he looked at her. "You should go inside," Marco said, his voice dropping an octave. "It is cold." He did not step back. "I am not cold," Lily whispered. Tension coiled tight between them. A rubber band pulled to its snapping point. Marco's hand twitched on the railing, as if he wanted to reach for her, but he didn't. He clenched his jaw, the muscle feathering under the skin. "Go inside. Lily," he repeated, sounding like he was warning her. Lily hesitated, then slipped past him, her arm brushing against his chest. The contact sent a jolt of electricity through her that lingered long after she was back in the safety of the living room. That evening, the sky tore open. A storm rolled in off the coast, battering the glass walls of the penthouse with sheets of rain. Thunder rattled the floorboards. At 10 o'clock, the power grid in the district failed. The lights in the apartment flickered and died, plunging the world into darkness. The emergency lights in the hallway buzzed to life, casting eerie, long shadows across the floor. Lily couldn't sleep. The adrenaline from the day, the fear for Emma, the confusion about Marco, it was all buzzing under her skin. She put on her robe and walked out into the main living area. Marco was there. He had lit a dozen candles and placed them on the low coffee table. The soft, flickering light illuminated his face, casting deep hollows under his cheekbones. He had taken off his jacket and holster. His dress shirt was unbuttoned at the throat, revealing the column of his neck. He held a tumbler of amber liquid in one hand, staring into the flame of a candle. He looked lonely. That was the only word for it. A profound, aching loneliness that seemed to fill the massive room. "You are awake," he said without looking up. "The storm," Lily said, walking closer, "and everything else." Marco swirled the drink in his glass. "Sit." Lily sat on the opposite end of the leather sofa. She pulled her legs up under her robe. "Can I ask you something?" she said softly. Marco took a sip of his drink. "You can ask. I might not answer." "The ring," she said, glancing at the diamond on her hand, which caught the candlelight. "Sophia said it belonged to your fiancée, Elena, the one who died." Marco went still, for a long moment. The only sound was the rain lashing against the windows. "It did," he said finally. "Why give it to me?" Lily asked. "If it means so much. Why put it on a fake fiancé?" "Because it reminds me," Marco said, turning to look at her. His eyes were dark pools reflecting the flames. "Elena died because of me. Because I was arrogant. I thought I could keep the business and the girl separate. I was wrong." He took another drink, a bitter grimace crossing his face. "I gave it to you because it is a warning, Lily. A reminder of what happens when people get close to me. It is not a symbol of love. It is a symbol of guilt." Lily felt a pang of sorrow for him that was so sharp it hurt. "You are punishing yourself," she realized. "I am a bad man." "Lily," he said, his voice rough, "I do bad things. I buy people. I hurt people. I exist in the dark." "No," Lily said. She uncurled her legs and shifted closer to him on the couch. "A bad man would not care about a child's drawing. A bad man would not pay for a surgery for a stranger's daughter. You do bad things, Marco, but I do not think you are bad. You do not know me," he whispered. "I am learning," she said. She hated needing help. She'd spent her whole life fighting to stand on her own 2 feet, to prove she didn't need charity. But looking at him now, stripped of his armor, she realized that he needed something too. He needed to be seen, not as the boss, not as the monster, just as a man. The silence that fell was heavy, electric. The air was thick with things unsaid. The candlelight danced over his skin, highlighting the rough texture of his jaw, drawn by a pull she had tried to ignore for weeks. Lily moved. She slid closer until her knee brushed his thigh. Marco set his glass down on the table with a clink. He turned his body toward her. Lily reached out. Her fingers trembled slightly as she touched his arm. The muscle beneath the shirt was rock hard. "Marco," she whispered. He looked at her, his resistance crumbling like a dam breaking. He reached out and cupped her jaw with one large, warm hand. His thumb traced the line of her cheekbone, a touch so reverent it made her breath catch. His other hand settled on her hip, pulling her gently but firmly against him. Lily leaned in. Marco met her halfway. Their lips met in a slow, searching kiss. It tasted of scotch and rain and desperation. It was not the polished, performative kiss of a fake engagement. It was raw. It was real. Lily let out a soft sound, her fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt, pulling him closer. Marco groaned low in his throat. The kiss deepened, becoming hungry. His hand slid up into her hair, tilting her head back, devouring her. Heat flooded Lily's veins. She felt alive, terrifyingly alive. For the first time in years, she wasn't a mother or a waitress or a debtor. She was a woman, and she was wanted. Her hand slid up his chest, locking around his neck. His fingers flexed at her waist, digging in, possessing her. Their bodies aligned, chest to chest, heart to heart. Lily felt her knees go weak, melting into him. She wanted more. She wanted to forget the danger outside, the debt, the lies. She wanted to lose herself in the fire he had ignited. And then, abruptly, he stopped. Marco tore his mouth away. He pushed himself back, his chest heaving. He stared at her, his eyes wild, his pupils blown wide. He stood up, putting distance between them. He ran a hand through his hair, his jaw clenching so hard a muscle jumped in his cheek. No, he rasped. "Marco?" Lily whispered, her lips swollen, her body aching for him to come back. "I cannot do this," he said. His voice was laced with self-loathing. You deserve better than a man like me. Lily, you deserve light. I will only drag you into the dark." He looked at her one last time, a look full of regret and longing, and then turned away. The overhead lights flickered and buzzed back on, flooding the room with harsh, artificial brightness. The candles were drowned out, the intimacy evaporated, leaving Lily sitting alone on the couch, flushed, confused, and aching in a way that had nothing to do with fear. The next afternoon, the world felt gray. Lily took Emma to the clinic for her preoperative blood work. Marco had not spoken to her since the night before. He had left the apartment before she woke up, leaving only a security detail behind. Lily stood outside the clinic doors while Emma was inside with the nurse. She wrapped her coat tighter around herself, trying to shake the memory of his lips on hers. "Miss Hart." Lily turned. A man was standing there. He was wearing a beige suit that looked like it came from a department store rack, but he wore it with the confidence of someone who carried a badge. He had a bland, forgettable face, but his eyes were sharp. "Yes?" Lily asked, stepping back warily. "My name is Agent Carter," the man said, flashing a badge that was clipped to his belt. "FBI, do you have a moment? I have to get back to my daughter," Lily said, her heart skipping a beat. "This concerns your daughter," Carter said smoothly, "and the man who is currently paying for her medical bills." Lily froze. "What do you want? We know about the arrangement." "Miss Hart," Carter said, stepping closer, "we know about the debt. We know you are not really engaged to Marco Vescari. You are a civilian caught in a very dangerous web." "I have nothing to say to you," Lily said, turning toward the door. "Marco Vescari is the target of a federal RICO investigation," Carter said to her back. "We are going to take him down, Lily. It is not a matter of if, but when. And when we do, everyone close to him is going to get hurt. Collateral damage." Lily stopped. She turned back to him. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you seem like a good mother," Carter said, his voice dropping to a sympathetic tone that made Lily's skin crawl. "You are trying to save your little girl. But ask yourself, is she safe in Vescari's world? How long until a bullet meant for him finds her? Or you?" Lily stared at him, the fear she had pushed down resurfacing. "Cooperate with us," Carter said, slipping a business card into her hand. "Help us end this quickly, before the fire spreads. Think about Emma's future. Miss Hart, if you are standing next to Marco when the hammer drops, you go to prison. And Emma goes to foster care." He let that hang in the air, a poisonous, terrifying threat wrapped in a smile. "Think about it," he said. He turned and walked away, blending into the pedestrian traffic. Lily looked down at the white card in her hand. The seed of doubt had been planted, and it was taking root deep in her chest. She looked at the clinic door, then at the card, and wondered if saving Marco meant destroying her own life. The air in the Vescari family study was always cold, regardless of the season. It was a room built of mahogany and silence, smelling of old paper and the lingering smoke of expensive cigars. Lorenzo Vascari sat behind his desk, his hands folded atop a leather ledger, looking at his son with eyes that were as flat and hard as river stones. "Attachments are weaknesses. Marco," Lorenzo said. His voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of 50 years of violence. "You are distracted. You are spending your nights in that penthouse playing house with the waitress instead of securing our supply lines. I am ensuring the loyalty of our investors," Marco replied, standing stiffly by the window. "The engagement is the face we show the public. It is a strategy." "It was a strategy," Lorenzo corrected. "Now it looks like a liability. The Caldero family smells blood. They see you protecting her, moving her into the fortress, paying for the brat's doctors. They think you have gone soft, and in this life, soft men are dead men." Marco turned, his jaw set in a rigid line. "I am handling the Calderos. Are you?" Lorenzo asked. "Or are you waiting for them to make a move because you are afraid to start a war that might spill onto your new carpet?" Marco left the study without another word, but the old man's words hooked into his skin like barbs. He walked out into the corridor where Rocco was waiting. Rocco, usually the most stoic of his men, looked uneasy. He checked his phone, then looked at Marco. "We have a problem, boss," Rocco said, keeping his voice low. "What is it? We spotted a tail on the girl's mother this morning. And yesterday, a black van was parked 2 blocks from the penthouse, watching the balcony. It is the Caldero crew. They are mapping out Lily's movements. They are mapping out the kid's schedule." Marco felt a cold rage settle in his gut, heavy and poisonous. "Increase the detail." He ordered, "I want 4 men on the penthouse lobby, not 2, and tell the driver if he sees so much as a shadow he does not like, he drives straight to the safe house. That night." The tension in the penthouse was thick enough to choke on. Lily was in the kitchen, washing dishes with a ferocity that threatened to break the porcelain. She'd seen the extra guards in the lobby. She'd seen the way Marco checked the windows before he let her walk past them. Marco stood by the kitchen island, pouring a drink he did not really want. The silence between them was a physical thing, built of fear and unspoken resentments. "You have to stop this," Lily said suddenly, turning off the tap. She turned to face him, her hands dripping soapy water onto the floor. "Stop what?" Marco asked. "Weary. This life," Lily said. "The guards, the guns, the way you look at every car on the street like it is going to explode. Marco, look at us. We're living in a cage. It is a golden cage. Lily," Marco said, taking a sip of the amber liquid, "you are safe here." "For how long?" she demanded, stepping closer. "Until your father decides I am in the way? Until this Caldero crew decides to shoot through the windows? You have enough money, you could leave. You could go somewhere they cannot find you." Marco laughed, a short, bitter sound devoid of humor. "You think I can just put in my 2 weeks' notice? You think I can retire to a beach house and forget where the bodies are buried? Why not?" Lily pleaded. "Because men like me do not get to retire," Marco said. His voice was low, laced with a brutal honesty that made Lily shiver. "We leave this life in one of 2 ways. In a coffin or in handcuffs. There is no third option." "Then why drag us into it?" Lily asked, her voice cracking. "Because I needed you," Marco said, "and now I need to keep you alive. That is the only job I have left." He set the glass down and walked out of the room, refusing to look back, refusing to let her see that he wanted the beach house just as much as she did, and that he hated himself for knowing he would never see it. The next afternoon, the elevator doors to the penthouse slid open, and Sofia Vascari stepped out. She was dressed in white silk, looking like an ice sculpture brought to life. She carried a sleek black folder. "Marco is not here," Lily said, standing up from the sofa where she had been reading a story to Emma's empty spot. Emma was at the clinic for a checkup with the nanny Marco had hired. "I know," Sofia said, breezing past her. "I came to drop off the contracts for the venue. Father wants the wedding date moved up. It makes the alliance look stronger." Lily felt a wave of nausea. The wedding, the fake wedding that felt more like a sentencing hearing every day. Sofia dropped the folder on the coffee table and looked at Lily. Her gaze dropped to the ring on Lily's hand. She stared at it with a mixture of pity and malice. "It fits you," Sophia noted. "I was not sure it would—" Elena had such slender fingers. Lily froze. "Who is Elena?" Sophia raised an eyebrow, a cruel smile touching her lips. "Oh, he did not tell you? I suppose he wouldn't. Marco likes to keep his ghosts locked away?" She took a step closer, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Elena was his fiancée. His real fiancée. 5 years ago, she was beautiful, sophisticated. They were madly in love, or so Marco thought. She died in a car accident on the I-95, but it was not really an accident. The brakes had been tampered with. It was a message from our enemies. Lily looked down at the heavy diamond on her finger. The stone suddenly felt freezing cold, burning her skin. "He gave me a dead woman's ring?" Lily whispered, horror washing over her. "He is sentimental," Sophia said with a shrug. "Or maybe he just likes to see if history repeats itself. You are just a placeholder, darling. A prop to help him get over his guilt. Do not mistake the role for the reality." Sophia turned and walked back to the elevator, leaving Lily standing in the middle of the silent room, feeling stripped bare. She wasn't a partner. She wasn't even a friend. She was just a ghost standing in for a woman he had actually loved. When Marco returned 2 hours later, the air in the penthouse was volatile. He walked in, tossing his keys on the console table, and immediately sensed the shift. Lily was standing by the window, her arms wrapped around herself, vibrating with a tension that radiated across the room. "What is wrong?" Marco asked, loosening his tie. Lily turned. Her face was pale, her eyes blazing with a mixture of hurt and fury. "She told me," Lily said. Marco paused. "Who told you what?" "Sophia." Lily spat. "She told me about Elena. She told me about the ring." Marco's face shut down. It went completely blank, the shutters closing over his eyes. Sophia should keep her mouth shut. "Is it true?" Lily demanded, walking toward him. "Did you put a ring on my finger? Am I just wearing a dead woman's jewelry so you can play pretend?" "It is a ring," Marco said, his voice dropping to a warning growl. "It is a symbol. It means you are under my protection. That is all." "You made me feel like I mattered," Lily shouted, the tears finally spilling over. "You looked at me. You touched me. You made me believe that maybe you actually saw me. But I am just a replacement. I am just a convenient body to fill a space because you cannot get over her." "Stop it," Marco snapped. "No," Lily yelled, stepping right up to him, fueled by the humiliation that had been burning in her gut for hours. "You are a coward, Marco. You hide behind your guns. You hide behind your money, and you hide behind me. You use me as a shield so you do not have to feel anything real." "I have sacrificed everything to keep you safe," Marco roared back, his composure finally shattering. "You have no idea what I have done. You have no idea the blood I have on my hands to keep that debt collector away, to keep the Calderos from burning your building down with you inside it. Do not talk to me about using people. I am bleeding myself dry for you. Then let me go," Lily screamed. "I cannot." Marco grabbed her wrist. His grip was hard, desperate. He pulled her toward him, stopping her from turning away. Lily wrenched her hand back, but he did not let go. She looked up at him, her chest heaving, her eyes wild with anger. He looked back, his breathing ragged, his eyes dark with a turbulence that matched her own. The air between them crackled. It was a violent, volatile energy. The anger was so high, so intense, that it tipped over the edge. Lily stared at his mouth. Marco stared at hers. In a single, breathless second, the shouting stopped. Marco stepped forward. Lily met him halfway. They crashed into each other. It was not a gentle kiss. It was fierce, desperate, and bruising. Marco's hands flew to her face, tilting her head back, his mouth devouring hers with a hunger that had been suppressed for weeks. Lily made a sound low in her throat, a mix of a sob and a moan, and grabbed the lapels of his jacket, pulling him closer. He walked her backward until her shoulders hit the wall. He pressed his body against hers, pinning her there. His hands slid down her back, flattening against her spine, pulling her hips flush against his. She could feel the rapid, hammer gun beat of his heart against her chest, matching her own rhythm. Lily's hands tangled in his hair, her fingers gripping the dark strands. She opened her mouth to him, tasting the coffee and the rage on his tongue. It was chaotic and overwhelming. It was the release of all the fear, all the proximity, all the nights spent pretending they were nothing to each other. Marco groaned, his forehead pressing against hers as he kissed her jaw, her neck, the sensitive spot behind her ear. His hand moved to her waist, his thumb digging into her side, possessive and firm. "Mine," he muttered against her skin. "You are mine." The word cut through the haze of passion like a knife. Lily gasped, her eyes snapping open. The reality of who he was and what he was dragging her into crashed back down on her. She slammed her palms against his chest. "Stop," she choked out. Marco froze. He pulled back, his chest heaving, his eyes black and dilated. He looked dazed, as if waking from a trance. Lily pushed him away, harder this time. She stumbled back, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. Her lips felt swollen and bruised. "I cannot do this," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Lily?" Marco started, reaching for her. "No," she said, holding up a hand. "Do not. I do not want this. I do not want to confuse fear with love. Marco, I am scared all the time. I am angry all the time. And you are chaos. I refuse to lose myself in someone else's chaos again. Not after Emma's father, not ever." Marco stood against the wall, his shirt rumpled, his breathing slowly returning to normal. He looked at her with a profound sadness that broke her heart, but she steeled herself against it. He looked at the ring on her finger. It still sparkled, mocking them both. "Go to bed, Lily," he said quietly. She turned and walked out of the room, leaving him standing alone in the wreckage of their argument. 2 days later, the sky over Briarwood was the color of slate. Lily sat in a booth at a coffee shop 3 blocks from the penthouse. She wore sunglasses to hide her red-rimmed eyes. Agent Carter slid into the seat across from her. He did not order coffee. He placed a tablet on the table and pushed it toward her. "You need to see this," he said. Lily looked at the screen. It was a slideshow of surveillance photos, a man beaten in an alley, a car engulfed in flames, and then a photo of Lorenzo Viscari shaking hands with a man Lily recognized from the news as the head of the Caldero crime syndicate. "They are escalating," Carter said. "Lorenzo is planning a purge. He wants to wipe out the competition to secure the territory before the feds move in. There is going to be a war, Miss Hart, and innocent people are going to get caught in the crossfire." Lily looked away, feeling sick. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because Marco is in the middle of it," Carter said. "He's loyal to his father. He will follow orders, and when the bodies start dropping, he is going to go down for it, unless you help us stop it." "Help you how?" Lily asked. "We know there is a meeting scheduled for Friday," Carter said. "Lorenzo, the Calderos, and the key lieutenants. We need to know where it is, and we need a recording of what is agreed upon." "You want me to spy on him," Lily whispered. "I want you to save lives," Carter corrected, "including your daughters. If you help us, we can offer you witness protection, a new name, a new start, a clean slate for Emma. If you do not, well, when the RICO indictments come down, Child Protective Services will be the least of your worries." Lily looked at the photos again. She saw the violence. She saw the trap closing around Marco, a trap he was too stubborn to see himself. If he went to prison, he was gone. If he fought the war, he was dead. But if she helped the feds, maybe there was a way to dismantle the organization without killing the man. "I will do it," she said, her voice barely audible. Carter nodded, satisfied. He slid a small black device across the table. "Just the meeting. Lily, get us the location and the conversation. We will handle the rest." Lily felt like she was carrying a stone in her stomach as she went through the motions of her day. She told herself she was doing the right thing. She told herself she was protecting Emma. But every time she looked at Marco, she felt like a traitor. That night, she insisted on going to Harbor Line. "I need to check the inventory," she told Marco, "and the staff needs to see me." "It keeps up appearances," Marco had argued, but eventually relented, assigning 2 guards to stand by the back door while she worked in the closed restaurant. It was 1 in the morning. The restaurant was dark, illuminated only by the streetlights filtering through the blinds. Lily was at the register, counting out the tips for the kitchen staff. The rhythmic counting of bills was soothing. 20, 40, 60. She didn't hear the car pull up. She didn't hear the package being placed against the glass of the front entrance. She only heard the shatter. The front window exploded inward. A force like a giant fist slammed into Lily, lifting her off her feet and throwing her backward over the counter. The world turned white, then deafeningly loud. The sound of the blast tore through the air, followed instantly by the raining chime of thousands of shards of glass hitting the floor. Smoke filled the room instantly, acrid and choking. Lily lay on the floor behind the bar, her ears ringing with a high-pitched whine. She coughed, tasting dust and blood. She tried to move, but her body felt heavy, disconnected. Miss Hart! Miss Hart! Hands grabbed her arms. It was one of the guards. He dragged her across the floor, glass crunching under his boots. She was hauled out the back door into the alley, gasping for cool air. Sirens were already wailing in the distance, getting closer. Lily sat on a crate, shaking uncontrollably. She touched her forehead and her hand came away red, just a cut. But the restaurant, the front of Harbor Line, was a jagged maw of smoke and ruin. A car screeched to a halt at the mouth of the alley. Marco was out of the vehicle before it stopped moving. He ran toward her, his face a mask of absolute terror. He wasn't the mafia boss in that moment. He was just a man watching his world burn. Lily. He dropped to his knees in the grime of the alley. His hands, usually so steady, were shaking as he reached out and cradled her face. He tilted her head, checking her eyes, checking the cut on her forehead. His thumbs wiped away the soot and the blood. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his voice cracking. "Tell me where you are hurt." "I am okay," Lily stammered, her teeth chattering from shock. "I am okay. It was just the glass." Marco pulled her into his chest. He buried his face in her hair, holding her so tightly it hurt. She could feel him trembling. "I thought I lost you," he whispered into her hair. "I thought—" He pulled back to look at her. His eyes were wet. The walls he had built, the defenses he had shouted about during their argument, were gone. He looked at her with a raw, undeniable love that terrified her more than the bomb had. "This ends," he vowed, his voice low and lethal. "I will burn the whole city down if I have to. No one touches you." Lily looked at him. She saw the violence in his eyes, the promise of retribution. She knew what he would do. He would go to war. He would kill. And eventually, he would be killed. The bomb had been a warning. The next one would not miss. She looked at the man she loved, and she knew she did love him, despite everything, and realized she couldn't let him destroy himself. She couldn't let him become the monster the world wanted him to be. If she wanted to save him, she had to stop him. She leaned her head against his hand, closing her eyes in the flicker of the emergency lights, amidst the smell of smoke and fear. Lily made her choice. She would wear the wire. She would betray him to the feds, because it was the only way to keep him out of a coffin. The smell of smoke still clung to Lily's hair, a sharp and acrid reminder of the explosion that had shattered the front windows of Harbor Line less than 24 hours ago. She sat in a straight-backed leather chair in Lorenzo Viscari's private study, her hands folded tightly in her lap to stop them from shaking. Lorenzo paced behind his desk. The older man looked like a storm contained in a suit, his silver hair gleaming under the harsh chandelier light. His eyes narrowed with a paranoia that made the air in the room feel thin. "You were there late," Lorenzo said, his voice a low rasp that scraped against Lily's nerves. "Why?" "The restaurant closes at 10. The bomb went off at 1 in the morning." "I was counting the inventory," Lily said, keeping her voice small and trembling. It was not an act. She was terrified, not just of the bomb, but of the secret she was carrying, the conversation with Agent Carter, the deal she had made in her head to save Marco. "Inventory takes 3 hours, Lorenzo asked, stopping to lean over the desk. He scrutinized her face as if looking for a crack in the porcelain. "Or were you waiting for someone? Perhaps someone who wanted to know when the building would be empty?" Lily's heart hammered against her ribs. "Are you accusing me?" she asked, letting a flash of genuine indignation color her tone. "I could have died. Lorenzo." The glass cut my face. I was thrown across the room. Lorenzo did not blink. "Collateral damage makes for a convincing cover," he said coldly. "You have a lot of debt. Miss Hart, and my son has a blind spot where you are concerned. It would be very easy for a woman in your position to sell information for a fresh start." Before Lily could answer, the heavy oak doors swung open. Marco walked in. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. There was a bandage on his hand from where he had cleared the debris, and his eyes were dark pits of exhaustion. "That is enough," Marco said. Lorenzo straightened up, his gaze shifting to his son. "I am asking the necessary questions. Marco, someone leaked the security rotation. That is why the bomb was planted when the patrol car was around the block. There is a rat." "It is not her," Marco said, his voice flat and final. He walked over to Lily's chair and placed a hand on her shoulder. His grip was firm, possessive, a silent warning to his father. She was the target. Father, not the accomplice. Lorenzo looked at the hand on Lily's shoulder, then up at Marco's face. He let out a short, dismissive scoff. "You are thinking with your heart," he said with disdain, "and that is why you will lose this war. Get her out of my sight. But mark my words, boy. Attachments are weaknesses, and this one is going to get you killed." The drive back to the penthouse was silent. Marco stared out the window, his jaw working as he clenched his teeth. When they arrived, the apartment felt different. The warmth that had started to grow between them in the last few weeks had been sucked out, replaced by a cold, clinical efficiency. Marco walked into the bedroom while Lily was taking off her coat. He did not look at her. He stood by the window, looking out at the city skyline. "Pack your bags," he said. Lily froze. "What?" "Pack your bags," Marco repeated. He turned around. His face was a mask of stone. No emotion, no softness, just the boss. "The arrangement is over." "Over?" Lily asked, the words sticking in her throat. "But the contract, the debt. I have cleared the debt," Marco said, his voice devoid of inflection. "The hospital is paid, the collectors are gone, but this, us, it does not work anymore. You heard my father. You are a liability. I cannot fight a war with the Calderos if I'm constantly worrying about a waitress getting caught in the crossfire." Lily felt like he had slapped her. A liability. After everything, after the dance, after the balcony, after the way he had held her in the alley while the sirens wailed, she was just a liability. "Is that all I am to you?" she whispered. "A distraction." Marco did not flinch, but his hands curled into fists at his sides. Yes, he lied. It was a terrible lie. His eyes betrayed him. They were full of a desperate, searing pain that contradicted every cold word coming out of his mouth. He was pushing her away. He was cutting her loose to save her life, even if it meant breaking his own heart. "Fine," Lily said, her voice shaking with a mix of devastation and pride. She would not beg. She would not ask him to love her if he was determined to save her by hurting her. She walked to the closet and pulled out her suitcase. Her hands trembled violently as she threw her clothes in. She felt like she was moving through water, everything slow and muted. When the bag was zipped, she turned to him. She looked at the ring on her finger, the diamond that had started it all, the ring that belonged to a dead woman. She grabbed the band and twisted it off. Her finger felt naked without the weight of it. She walked over to the dresser and set it down on the dark wood. It made a sharp click. "Goodbye, Marco," she said, grabbing the handle of her suitcase. She turned to the door, but she didn't make it 2 steps. Marco moved. He was in front of her in a second, blocking her path. He reached past her, picked up the ring, and grabbed her left hand. "Take it," he said roughly. "No," Lily said, trying to pull her hand away. "I am not your fiancé anymore. I am not your liability." "Keep it," Marco insisted. He pressed the ring into her palm and curled her fingers over it, his hands engulfing hers. His composure cracked, the mask slipping just enough to show the terrified man beneath. "You keep it," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion he refused to name. "You keep it until things are settled, until I know you are safe. If anyone asks, you are still mine. It is the only protection I can give you now." Lily looked up at him. His eyes were shining. He wasn't sending her away because he didn't care. He was sending her away because he cared too much. "Marco," she whispered. He let out a shuddering breath. "Stay tonight," he said. "It is too late to move you safely. The driver will take you in the morning. Just stay." That night, the penthouse was quiet, but it was not the silence of strangers. It was the silence of two people standing on the edge of a cliff. They sat side by side on the edge of the bed. They were not touching, but the heat between them was palpable. Lily stared at her hands in her lap. Marco stared at the floor. "In another life," Marco said softly, breaking the silence, "I think I would have liked to be an architect. I like building things. I hate destroying them." Lily turned her head to look at him. "In another life," she said, "I would have finished nursing school. I would have taken Emma to the ocean every Sunday." Marco nodded slowly. "We could have met there," he said. "At the ocean. I would have been building a sandcastle, and you would have been saving it from the tide." Lily let out a watery laugh. "You? Building a sandcastle? You would probably hire someone to build it for you." Marco smiled. It was a small, sad smile, but it reached his eyes. "Maybe. Or maybe, for the right person, I would get my hands dirty." Lily felt a tear slide down her cheek. She leaned her head over, resting it against his shoulder. It was a surrender. Marco stiffened for a second, then exhaled a long breath and wrapped his arm around her. He drew her in, pulling her fully against his chest. It felt like coming home. They stayed like that for a long time, just breathing together. Then, slowly, Marco shifted. He lay back on the bed, pulling her with him. They did not get under the covers. They lay on top of the duvet, fully clothed, seeking comfort rather than passion. Lily curled against him, her head on his chest, her ear pressed over his heart. She could hear the steady, rhythmic thump of it. It was the only sound in the world that mattered. Marco's hand came up to stroke her hair. His touch was hesitant, reverent. He traced the line of her spine through her shirt, his fingers memorizing the shape of her. Lily lifted her head. Their faces were inches apart in the shadows. "Marco." She breathed. He leaned in. The kiss was soft at first, a brush of lips that tasted of sorrow and salt. But then Lily made a small sound, pressing closer, and the kiss changed. It grew deeper, more intense. Marco's hand moved to her jaw, tilting her head back. His other arm tightened around her waist, crushing her to him. It was a desperate kind of intimacy. They kissed like they were trying to say all the things that could not be spoken. "I love you. I am sorry. Don't go. Please stay." Lily's hands explored the planes of his face, the rough stubble on his jaw, the tension in his neck. Marco's hand slid down her back, pressing her hips against his. The friction of their bodies, even through the layers of denim and cotton, was electric. It felt heartbreakingly right. Lily shifted her leg, tangling it with his. She pressed closer, wanting to erase the space between them, wanting to disappear into him. Marco groaned against her mouth. His hand slid under the hem of her shirt, his fingers burning against the skin of her waist. Then he stopped. He froze, his whole body going rigid. He tore his mouth away from hers and pressed his forehead against her forehead, breathing hard. "Marco?" Lily whispered, dazed. "No," he rasped. He closed his eyes, his brow furrowed in pain. "If I cross that line," he whispered, his voice sounding like it was being torn out of his throat, "I will never let you go. And I have to let you go. Lily, I have to—" Lily's eyes filled with tears. She understood. If they made love now, if they bound themselves together completely, neither of them would have the strength to walk away in the morning. And walking away was the only way she and Emma survived. "You are right," she whispered, though it broke her heart to say it. "We cannot. Not while everything is burning." Marco let out a shaky breath. He did not let go of her. He pulled her back down against his chest, wrapping his arms around her like a vice. "Sleep," he commanded softly. "Just sleep." They fell asleep like that, tangled together, clinging to each other as if they could physically hold back the dawn. The morning sun was cruel. It flooded the room with bright, indifferent light, exposing the reality they had tried to hide from in the dark. Marco was up before Lily. When she walked into the living room, he was already dressed in a dark suit, his armor back in place. He was on the phone, his voice clipped and professional. "Yes, the apartment on 4th Street, under the name Peterson. It is secure. 2 men at the door." He hung up when he saw her. His face was composed, distant. The vulnerable man from the night before was gone, locked away deep inside. "The car is downstairs," he said. Lily nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She picked up her suitcase. Emma was already with the nanny by the elevator, holding her stuffed rabbit. Marco walked them down to the car. He opened the door for Lily. She paused, looking up at him one last time. She wanted to shake him. She wanted to kiss him. She wanted to scream. "Be safe," Marco said. It sounded like a prayer. "You too," Lily whispered. She got in. The door slammed shut with a finality that echoed in her bones. As the car pulled away, Lily turned in her seat to look out the rear window. Marco was standing on the sidewalk, his hands deep in his pockets, his jaw clenched tight. He did not wave, he just watched her go, looking like a man who was cutting out his own heart and watching it drive away. The new apartment was clean, beige, and soulless. It smelled of lemon cleaner and emptiness. Lily had just put Emma down for a nap in the unfamiliar bedroom when the buzzer rang. She checked the monitor. It was Agent Carter. She buzzed him in. Carter walked in, looking out of place in the small living room in his cheap suit. He did not waste time on pleasantries. "We have a timeline," he said. "What?" Lily asked, hugging her arms around herself. "The sit down," Carter said. "It is happening tomorrow night. Lorenzo Vascari, the Caldero leadership and the top lieutenants. They are meeting to negotiate a truce, or a massacre. We are not sure which." "And you want me there," Lily said flatly. "We need you there," Carter corrected. "We need a wire in that room. We need to hear the terms. If they agree to divide the territory, that is conspiracy. If Lorenzo orders a hit on the competition, that is intent to commit murder. Either way, we get enough to take down the leadership of both families, including Marco," Lily said. Carter sighed. "Lily, Marco is going to be there. He is the underboss. If he walks into that room, he is part of the conspiracy. But if you help us, we can cut a deal. We can present his cooperation as part of the plea. Without you, he goes down for 20 years, minimum." Lily looked at the beige walls. She thought about the bomb at the restaurant. She thought about the dead look in Marco's eyes as he stood on the sidewalk. He was walking into a trap. If he stayed with his father, he would end up in prison or dead. The only way to save him was to destroy his world before it destroyed him. "I will do it," Lily said. "Good," Carter said. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small, flat device. "Tape this under your dress. Low back. It has a 4-hour battery life." "Why would I be at the meeting?" Lily asked. "Marco broke up with me." "Lorenzo does not know that," Carter said, "and the Calderos expect you. You are the leverage. Lily, the symbol of Marco's weakness. Lorenzo wants you there to prove that his son has you under control. Marco will not be able to stop you from coming without admitting he lost you." Lily felt a wave of nausea. She was going to be a pawn for everyone. For Lorenzo, for the Calderos, for the feds. But she would do it. For Emma, and for Marco, across the city. In the back room of a Vascari social club, Marco sat in a cloud of smoke. Rocco stood in front of him, looking grim. "You are sure?" Marco asked, his voice deadly quiet. "I am sure." "Boss," Rocco said, "I checked the phone logs. Nico has been talking to the Caldero captain 3 times a day for the last week, and the money trail, there is a transfer of $200,000 into an offshore account in Nico's name." Marco closed his eyes. "Nico, his cousin, the man he had grown up with, he's selling us out." Marco said, "He's setting up the meeting." Rocco said, "He pushed for the warehouse location. He insisted on the minimal security detail to show trust." "It is a kill box." "Marco, the Calderos are not coming to talk. They are coming to wipe the board clean, and Nico is opening the door for them. Does my father know? Marco asked. Lorenzo does not believe it, Rocco said. He thinks Nico is loyal. He thinks you are the one who is compromised because of the girl. Marco opened his eyes. They were cold, hard flint. Then we go alone, Marco said. We go to the meeting, but we do not go to talk. He stood up and walked to the wall safe. He spun the dial and pulled out a heavy, matte black handgun. He checked the magazine and slid it back in with a sharp click. Get the men ready, Marco ordered. The ones we trust. We are walking into a trap. Rocco. And the girl? Rocco asked. She's gone, Marco said, a spasm of pain crossing his face. She is safe. She is miles away from this. The night of the meeting, the fog rolled in off the harbor, thick and white. The warehouse district was a ghost town of rusted metal and wet pavement. Lily sat in the back of a black town car provided by the feds. Though it bore Vescari plates to maintain the ruse, she wore a dark blue dress that Marco had bought her, taped to the small of her back, cold against her skin. Was the wire. Her heart was beating so hard she thought it might bruise her ribs. She looked down at her hand. The ring was there. Marco had told her to keep it until things were settled. Tonight. Everything would be settled. The car slowed as it approached the docks. Surveillance vans were parked 2 streets over, disguised as utility trucks. Lily knew Agent Carter was listening. She knew a SWAT team was on standby, but she also knew that once she walked through those warehouse doors, she was on her own. The car stopped. The driver, an undercover agent, opened the door. Lily stepped out into the mist. The warehouse loomed ahead, a massive, silent beast. She took a breath that tasted of salt and fear. She touched the ring one last time for courage. Then she began to walk toward the metal doors, knowing that one wrong word, one slip, one mistake would not just destroy the man she loved, it would get them both killed. The fog that rolled off the harbor was thick enough to taste. It smelled of brine, rust, and the decaying wood of the old piers that jutted out into the black water like broken teeth. The warehouse designated for the meeting sat at the end of a dead-end road, a massive corrugated steel beast that groaned in the coastal wind. Inside, the atmosphere was oppressive. Harsh halogen lights buzzed overhead, casting long, stark shadows across the concrete floor. 2 long folding tables had been set up in the center of the vast empty space, creating a no-man's land between the 2 factions. On the left stood the Vescari men, dressed in dark coats, their hands hovering near their waistbands. On the right were the Caldero soldiers, looking twitchy and aggressive. The air vibrated with a tension that felt like a physical weight, a static charge waiting for a single spark to ignite an inferno. Lily walked in on Marco's arm. Her heels clicked rhythmically on the concrete, a sound that seemed far too loud in the heavy silence. She wore a dark blue dress with a high neckline, chosen specifically to hide the thin wire taped to the small of her back. The device felt like a brand against her skin, freezing cold and burning hot all at once. Every breath she took was shallow. Every beat of her heart felt like a hammer striking an anvil, loud enough, she feared, for Marco to hear. Marco felt steady beside her. His arm was a solid bar of iron beneath the wool of his coat. He did not look at her, keeping his eyes trained on the men across the room, but as they reached the table, he leaned down. His lips brushed her ear, a ghost of a touch that made her shiver. "Stay close to me," he murmured, his voice so low only she could hear. "When this is done, you are out. I have a plane waiting at the private airfield. You and Emma will be in Europe by morning. You will be free of all of it. Lily, I promise." Lily froze, a lump forming in her throat that made it impossible to swallow. He was planning her escape. Even now, while walking into a den of wolves, he was thinking about how to get her out, and she was walking him straight into a cage. The guilt was a physical pain, a knife twisting in her gut. She wanted to rip the wire off. She wanted to scream. But she looked at the grim faces of the Caldero gunmen, and she remembered the bomb at the restaurant. She remembered Agent Carter's photos. If she stopped now, Marco would die. Lorenzo Vescari stood at the head of the table. He looked old tonight. his face gray under the lights, but his eyes were still sharp. He nodded to the man opposite him, Sal Caldero, a heavy-set man with a scar running through his eyebrow. "Let us make this quick," Lorenzo said, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. Agent Carter, sitting in a cramped van 3 streets away, adjusted his headphones. The audio feed crackled, then cleared. He signaled to the tactical team. "We are live." The negotiation began. It was a dry, clinical discussion of violence. Lorenzo offered 20% of the shipping routes. Caldero demanded 40%. They spoke of territories like they were trading baseball cards, but every street name mentioned was a place where real families lived, where real people could get hurt. 40% is an insult, Lorenzo spat. "We control the unions. Without us. Your containers sit on the docks until they rot. Then maybe we take the unions," Sal Caldero said, leaning forward. "Times are changing, old man. You're holding onto a kingdom that is already crumbling." Lily stood behind Marco's chair, her hands clutching her clutch bag so tightly her knuckles were white. She felt sick. Every word was being recorded. Every threat was a sentence. 10 years for racketeering, 20 for conspiracy. She was listening to Marco's life dissolve into legal statutes. Then, the air in the room shifted. Nico, Marco's cousin, who had been standing behind Lorenzo, took a step forward. He was smiling, but it was a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Sal is right, Uncle," Nico said. Lorenzo turned, his brow furrowing. "What did you say?" "I said he is right," Nico repeated, his voice rising. "The Vescari family is weak. And do you know why? Because of him." Nico pointed a finger at Marco. Marco remained seated, his face impassive, but his eyes locked onto his cousin. "You are making a mistake, Nico," Marco said quietly. "Am I?" Nico laughed. He looked around the room. "Look at you, the feared Marco Vescari, playing house with a waitress, bringing her here to a sit-down. You are soft, Marco. You let a woman get into your head, and because of that, you let the business rot." Nico reached into his jacket. He did not pull out a cigar. He pulled out a silver pistol and leveled it at Lorenzo's head. The room exploded into motion. Guns were drawn on both sides. The sound of slides racking back was a terrifying mechanical chorus. Chairs scraped against the concrete as men scrambled for position. "I am taking over," Nico shouted, his eyes wild. "Me and the Calderos. We are the new management." Marco stood up slowly, his hands held out, palms open. "Nico, put the gun down. You do not want to do this." "I have already done it," Nico yelled. Lily watched in horror. This was it. The trap had sprung, but not the one the feds expected. They were going to kill Lorenzo. They were going to kill Marco. And then they would kill her. The noise in the room was deafening. Shouting men. The echo of footsteps. In the chaos, clarity washed over Lily. The wire. The feds. They were the only card she had left to play. "Marco!" she screamed. He turned to her, his arm instinctively reaching out to push her back. "I am wired," she shouted, her voice cutting through the tension. The room went deadly silent for a fraction of a second. Marco froze. He looked at her, his dark eyes wide with shock. "What?" he whispered. "I am wired," Lily choked out, tears streaming down her face. "The FBI is listening right now. They are outside. I did it to stop this. I did it to save you." The confession hung in the air like smoke. Lily saw the look on Marco's face, the stunning, gut-wrenching realization of her betrayal. He looked like she had shot him in the chest. The bitch is a rat. Nico screamed, "Kill them both!" Nico swung his gun away from Lorenzo and aimed it at Lily. Marco did not hesitate. He did not ask questions. He did not recoil in anger. He moved. With a roar, Marco grabbed the edge of the heavy oak table and flipped it. The wood crashed onto its side, creating a barrier just as the first shot rang out. The bullet bit into the wood with a dull thud. "Get down," Marco yelled. He grabbed Lily by the waist and threw her to the floor behind the overturned table. He dove on top of her, his heavy body covering hers completely. He shoved his jacket up around her head, shielding her from the splintering wood and flying debris. The warehouse erupted into a war zone. Gunfire thundered, deafening and relentless. Bullets sparked off the concrete floor and tore through the metal walls. Lily curled into a ball, sobbing, her face pressed against the cold floor. All she could feel was Marco, his weight, his heat, the rapid pounding of his heart against her back. "Stay down," he shouted into her ear, his voice rough. "Do not move. If they want to touch you, they have to go through me." He was protecting her, even knowing what she had done. Even knowing she had sold him out, he was using his own body as a shield to keep her safe. Marco shifted. He pulled his own weapon from his shoulder holster. "Stay covered," he commanded. He rose from their cover, popping up over the rim of the table. He fired 3 controlled, precise shots. Lily heard a scream. Marco ducked back down as a spray of bullets chewed up the top of the table. He looked at her. There was blood on his cheek from a splinter, but his eyes were clear. "I am getting you out of here," he said. He rose again. This time, he didn't just suppress the enemy. He advanced. He moved with a brutal, terrifying efficiency, firing at the Caldero gunmen who were trying to flank them. He hit Nico in the shoulder, spinning the traitor around and sending his gun skittering across the floor. Suddenly, the massive bay doors of the warehouse smashed open. "Federal agents, drop your weapons!" A tactical team swarmed into the building, clad in black armor, rifles raised, flashbang grenades detonated with blinding white light and concussive booms. The Caldero men dropped their guns. Nico, clutching his bleeding shoulder, fell to his knees. Lorenzo stood by the wall, looking old and defeated as the agents surrounded him. The shooting stopped. The silence that followed was filled with the sounds of heavy breathing and the click of handcuffs. Marco dropped his gun. He raised his hands slowly. 2 agents rushed forward, grabbing his arms and forcing him against the wall. They kicked his legs apart and patted him down. Lily scrambled up from the floor. She was shaking so hard she could barely stand. Agent Carter walked into the center of the room, stepping over the debris. He looked at Marco, then at the recording device he held in his hand. "We have it all," Carter said. "The conspiracy, the attempted murder, the admission of racketeering. It is over. Vescari." Marco did not look at Carter. He looked at Lily. Carter walked over to Marco. "We can make a deal. Marco, you testify against your father. You testify against the Calderos. You help us dismantle the network. If you do, we recommend a reduced sentence. 5 years, maybe less with good behavior. If you do not, you go away for life." Marco looked at Lorenzo, who was being led away in cuffs. The old man did not look back. Then Marco looked at Nico, who was weeping on the floor. Then he looked at Lily. She was standing amidst the ruin, soot-streaked, crying, her hands pressed to her mouth. "I will take the deal," Marco said, his voice raspy. Carter nodded. "Smart choice. On one condition," Marco added. He jerked his head toward Lily. "Her name stays out of it. She was never here. She never wore a wire. This is my cooperation, not hers. And you ensure that she and the girl are protected. Forever." Carter paused, then nodded. "Done." The agents pulled Marco's arms behind his back. The metal cuffs clicked shut. Lily broke. "Marco," she sobbed. She lunged forward, stumbling over the broken wood. She grabbed the front of his shirt, burying her face in his chest. "I am sorry," she cried, her voice ragged. "I am so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted to stop the dying. I wanted to save you." Marco couldn't use his hands, so he leaned forward. He pressed his forehead against hers, hard. He closed his eyes, breathing in the scent of her one last time. "Shh," he whispered. "It is okay. You did what a mother had to do. I betrayed you." She wept. "You saved me," he corrected softly. "You were right, Lily. The only way out was in cuffs. At least this way. I am still alive." The agents tugged at him. "Let us go." Marco pulled back slightly. He looked deep into her eyes. "The ring," he said. Lily looked at him, tears blurring her vision. "It was never about the business," Marco said. "It was never a prop. I meant it. I was just too much of a coward to say it." He smiled. A real, sad, heartbreaking smile. "Wait for me?" he asked. The agents pulled him away. Lily stood there, watching as they marched him out into the foggy night, her hand clutching the empty air where his heart had been. The headlines screamed across the front pages of the Briarwood Gazette for weeks. Vescari Empire crumbles. Lorenzo Vescari sentenced to life. Caldero Syndicate dismantled. The articles spoke of a high-ranking defector, an inside man who had provided the FBI with everything they needed to clean up the city. They spoke of bomb plots thwarted and shipping lines seized. Marco went to federal prison in upstate New York. He went quietly. Time moved on, indifferent to the tragedy. 1 year became 2. 2 became 4. Lily worked. She worked harder than she ever had. With the threat of the debt collectors gone and Emma's health stabilized thanks to the surgery, she poured herself into her job. She moved to a new restaurant, a bright, airy bistro on the north side called The Garden. She started as a server, then became a shift lead, and finally, the general manager. Emma grew. She started kindergarten, then first grade. She learned to read. She learned to ride a bike. Her cheeks turned pink, and her breath came easy. The shadows of the past receded, leaving only a quiet, modest life. But every night, before she went to sleep, Lily touched the ring she kept on a chain around her neck. She never wore it on her finger. Not yet. 5 years passed. The iron gates of the Federal Correctional Facility slid open with a heavy metallic clank. Marco Vescari stepped out. He looked different. His hair was shorter, cropped close to his skull, and the temples were frosted with gray. There was a new scar on his knuckles, a souvenir from a yard fight he hadn't started but had definitely finished. He wore simple clothes, jeans and a jacket that didn't cost $2,000. He carried a single duffel bag. He did not get into a black limousine. He walked to the bus stop and waited. He did not go back to the old neighborhood. The Vescari family was dead, and he had buried it. Instead, he used the skills he had. He started a small consulting firm, specializing in corporate security. He taught businesses how to protect themselves from men like the man he used to be. He lived in a small apartment. He paid his taxes. He lived quietly. But he never forgot the promise. It was a Tuesday evening in late autumn. The garden was busy, filled with the hum of conversation and the clinking of glasses. Lily was wiping down table 4 near the window. She was laughing at something a regular customer had said, her face flushed with the warmth of the room. She looked healthy. She looked happy. The bell above the door chimed. Lily looked up, her smile automatic. "Welcome to the..." The words died in her throat. The rag fell from her hand. Marco stood in the doorway. The restaurant seemed to go silent, the noise fading into a dull buzz. He looked older. He looked tired, but his eyes were the same, dark, intense, and fixed solely on her. He walked into the room. He didn't have the swagger of the Mafia Don anymore. He walked with the steady, humble gait of a man who had walked through fire and come out the other side. He approached her table. Lily couldn't move. Her heart was hammering against her ribs so hard she felt dizzy. "Hello, Lily," he said. His voice was raspy, familiar, and it made her knees weak. "Marco," she whispered, You are out. I have been out for 6 months," he said. "I wanted to get settled. I wanted to make sure I was the man you deserved before I came here." He pulled out a chair at the corner table, just like the first night at Harborline. When he sat down, Lily sat opposite him, her hands trembling in her lap. "How is Emma?" he asked. "She's good," Lily said, tears pricking her eyes. "She's 9 now. She asks about you. She still has the drawing." Marco smiled, and this time, it reached his eyes. He reached into the pocket of his jacket. He pulled out a small, velvet box. He placed it on the table between them. He opened it. The ring sat there. The heavy, square-cut diamond. It caught the warm light of the bistro, sparkling not with cold fire, but with a promise. "That ring is yours," Marco said softly. He pushed it across the tablecloth. "If you still want it," he said, "not for a deal, not for an alibi, not to pay a debt, just for us." Lily looked at the ring. She remembered the fear of the first time she had put it on. She remembered the weight of it. Then she looked at Marco. She saw the gray in his hair. She saw the scar on his hand. She saw the man who had stood in front of a gun for her, the man who had gone to prison for her. She reached out. Her fingertips hovered over the velvet. "Mom?" Lily turned. Emma was standing in the doorway of the kitchen, holding a school book. She'd grown tall, her hair long and curly. She looked at the man at the table. Her eyes widened. "Marco?" Emma asked. Marco turned. "Hi, Emma." Emma dropped her book. She ran across the restaurant. She didn't hesitate. She threw her arms around Marco's neck, burying her face in his shoulder. Marco froze for a second, then his arms came up to hug her back, his eyes squeezing shut as he held the little girl he had saved. Lily watched them, the tears finally spilling over. The fear was gone. The debt was paid. She reached out and took the ring from the box. Her hand was shaking, but her heart was steady. She slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Marco looked at her over Emma's shoulder. He saw the ring. He stood up, gently setting Emma down but keeping an arm around her. He walked around the table. He knelt beside Lily's chair, ignoring the stares of the other patrons. He took her hand. His thumb brushed over her knuckles, a touch that promised tenderness instead of danger. Lily nodded, unable to speak. Marco stood and pulled her up. He wrapped his arms around her waist, drawing her in. Lily cradled his face in her hands, feeling the rough texture of his skin, the reality of him. They kissed. It was slow, deep, and full of 5 years of waiting. It was a kiss of forgiveness and redemption. It tasted of freedom. Lily leaned into him, feeling the solid beat of his heart against hers. Emma squeezed between them, wrapping her arms around both of their waists. They stood there in the warm light of the restaurant. A new kind of family, forged in the fire of the past, but finally, truly free. "Thank you so much for listening to That Ring Is Yours," he said. "I hope you enjoyed the journey of Marco and Lily as much as I enjoyed bringing it to life for you. I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment down below and let me know where in the world you are listening from. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to Mafia Romance Stories for more emotional, realistic, and passionate tales. Share your thoughts in English in the comments. I read every single one. Until next time,